Hi, I'm Carol Fitzgerald from readinggroupguides.com, a website from the Book Report Network, and the host of the Book Reporter Talks to Video podcast series. Welcome to our Bookaccino live book group, where our guest this evening is Laura Dave, and we're going to be discussing her #1 New York Times bestseller in both hardcover and paperback, The Last Thing He Told Me. The book has also been adapted to a series on Apple TV+. I had the pleasure of talking to Laura when Last Thing You Told Me first came out. I'm so happy that she's making the time to join us this evening to talk about this book, which was a Book Reporter Bets On selection, on top of all the other accolades that it got. So let me talk about the format for tonight's event. We're going to start by assuming that everyone has read the book. Okay, we're going to be talking spoilers. This is not the kind of book club you just come for the wine. This is the kind you come and you have to be able to talk about the book. I'm going to begin with a discussion with Laura, and then 3 members of the audience will be joining us to share their questions. And then I'm be asking questions for a couple of other people. And then we're going to take questions from the audience. So down in the Q&A, down below, is where you could drop your questions in as the evening goes on. And that will be shared only with the panelists. And our fabulous editorial director, Tom Donadio, will be working on these questions and sharing them with Laura. So remember, chat is where you talk about yourselves and what you're reading and where you're from. Q&A is where you put what you would like to have asked of Laura. So with that housekeeping behind us, let's welcome Laura to the stage. I love this stage thing.
Hi.
Hi, Laura. So good to see you again.
It's always so good to see you, Carol. Thank you for having me.
I can't believe it was like 2 years ago. I mean, I just can't
know.
believe it. It's like that time went like that.
I know. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Like so much, so much. So let's start with the fact that I know you nurtured this book for a while. The last time that I'd seen you in person, you had written a book called, what is it, 99? What is it? How many grapes was it?
800 grapes.
800 grapes. So when you pick up a glass of red wine, remember 800 grapes go into that by the title of the book. So that's the last time we saw each other in person. But you were noodling something else when I saw you then. And then you came back and started writing this book, which I think you had an idea since 2012. Am I right?
Yeah. So actually even longer than that. So it all started for me. I mean, this is crazy, but in 2003, when the Enron trial was going on, I was so interested in, for anyone that doesn't remember that trial, it was a fraud trial that focused on this energy company in Texas. And I was really interested with how this fraudulent crime, this economic crime came to be. But primarily, my point of interest was that I saw Kenneth Lay's wife give an interview on NBC in which she said, "My husband's done nothing wrong." And I started to imagine then a woman who found herself in the predicament in which she thought her husband was someone that was in direct paradox to who the world was telling her that he was. And I knew I only wanted to tell that story if I could figure out how to make the woman the hero of it and not the victim of it. And so it was all the way in 2011 when I put pen to paper and sat down, and we received a wood turn bull for our wedding. And I thought, okay, I started learning about wood turning and the patience it takes and the perseverance and all of the things. And I had my in into who this woman might be. And that's really when I started working on the book.
So you started working on it, but in between you wrote a couple of other things because this was sort of not in your wheelhouse. This was not the kind of book. It was not a Laura Dave typical book.
That is absolutely true. I was writing this book, and I think one of the primary issues was that I always write without an outline. I just write from sort of an extemporaneous emotional question that I'm interested in thinking about. And here the question was, can we ever know the people we love? And I thought I was telling one kind of love story. And I was very attached to where the book ended in that initial version. And I really worked on that on and off, on and off. And it was really that ending, I think, that was holding me up from figuring out the story I was actually trying to tell. And then in 2016, I had my son. And when he was born, I realized this is the primal story of someone becoming a mother. and that the love story I thought I was telling was quite different than the love story I ended up telling.
Wow. So it thinks everybody sits down, thinks you sit down, you just start working at your computer and the story pours forth. But look how long it took and
Yes,
how many
yes.
different deviations along the way to say, this is where the story ended up. This is where we got
Yes.
to where we are.
Yes, yes, yes. That is really, I think, a lesson that I always try to share with young writers who are starting out, which is that for me, at least, writing is about rewriting.
Mhm.
And there is no such thing as a great first draft. And you sort of sit down. Stephen King has this wonderful book on writing in which he talks about the first draft is for you, the second draft is for the world. And I really think that if you can look at the first draft that way, or even the first 18 drafts that way, it helps you have the freedom of movement to ultimately get to the story you're going to end up sharing with readers.
And what you're going to end up telling.
Yeah.
So the first person narrative gives this book a really special feel. Were you
Yes.
always in first person? Were you always seeing it there?
I was always seeing it there, except that I had 100 pages from Owen's point of view. And so there was a whole part of the book in which we detached from Hannah and moved to where Owen was over those days.
Mhm.
And so and that was in third person. So ultimately I decided that I wanted to stay very close to Hannah, very close to her journey with Bailey. And I excised all of those words. But I did have them.
I always joke that really, I feel that the author should have like the outtakes on their website of,
Yes.
here's 1,000 words I threw out on Monday. Here's
Exactly.
the 2,000 on Tuesday, just so you can see, folks, where I came from, you know?
Exactly. I mean, this book, I threw out 70,000 words.
Wow. Wow.
So that's almost a complete novel of words that disappeared.
That disappear and just, not now, not
Yeah.
now. You made living on a houseboat sound really fun. Now, is this something you've ever done, or what drew you to have Hannah and Owen living on this houseboat? That sounds really fun.
You know, I love communities that are on the end of the earth in some way, because I think it requires something different of its inhabitants. And when I came across, originally it was a houseboat community it was up in Washington State that I came across online, and I thought, oh my gosh, well, that's interesting. And then I started looking at other houseboat communities, and then I came across the one in Sausalito and went up there and visited. And I just thought, wow, what an interesting juxtaposition. These houses are incredibly close together. You are really within a sense of community, and yet you are really anonymous and can kind of live privately. And I thought, what an interesting place to both restart your life if you're looking to do that, and to hide. And that's how I came to it.
Yeah. So did you ever go live on a houseboat? Did you have to go rent one of these to give you the?
I did not live on it. And actually the community is sort of so insular that it's quite difficult to rent one, though I did find one to rent. And then ultimately I just stayed in Sausalito instead. And, you know, the houseboat community there, the floating home community, has been so welcoming. They were so welcoming during the shoot of the TV show and during my initial research when I was working on the book. And so everyone talked to me that I needed to talk to, and was really helpful.
Oh, it's so much fun. It's like, oh, am I going to be in the book? Like, what page am I on?
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, I do remember when you're doing 800 Grapes, you got to be up on the vineyards for a very long time. And that was like, that was a rough job. That was
a rough job. That was the research my husband liked best of any research of my novels. I can tell you.
Have to line something else up good.
Yes.
So, okay. So you talked a little bit about Hannah's career as a woodworker. So you got this bowl that was wood turning, wood turner bowl. So did you start saying, I want to learn more about this? And then at the same time, did you say, this is what my character is going to do and why?
Yes. So that's an excellent question. And both. The answer is both. So I started learning more about wood turning. There's a famous family of wood turners, the Malthrop family, in which the grandfather, father, and son have all become world-renowned wood turners. And so I started, you know, watching their specials on PBS and learning about them and learning about wood turning. That was sort of my first introduction to them. And it became a very valuable introduction, because then, like that family, Hannah had a grandfather who sort of introduced introduced her into that world. So while I was learning about that, I also was thinking about what it infused Hannah with, and how that would help her metaphorically and literally uncover what happened to her husband.
And it was just so beautiful to see the way you work with the wood and the way which piece you're going to work with, what's speaking to you, what's saying something to you. Really, really amazing. So here's what we want to do. Debbie is going to join us. Debbie Moore, who's with us a lot. She's joined us for just about every one of these events. Tonight, she's joining us from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And she's a frequent guest, and she's always got great questions. So Debbie, I'm turning it over to you right now.
Hi, Laura. It's nice to meet you. I have a couple of questions. Did you start out to write a mystery or domestic thriller or a story about abandonment, belonging, and learning how to belong?
I think that's a great question. First of all, it's nice to meet you too, Debbie. And I think for me, the form of the novel was really due to my initial desire to have a character become the hero of her own life. I heard another interview all the way back a long time ago in which Gloria Steinem was quoted as saying how important it is for women to watch other women become the hero of their own lives. And so the very nature of that heroism meant that I had to sort of up the ante on what was happening to her. I think we are all quietly heroes in a million ways, in how we take care of our families, in how we do what we need to do every day, despite what might be going on with us. And I wanted here to just turn up the volume on that heroism, on that quiet heroism, and create somebody who we could all be, who was sort of living her life, happily married, newly married, but in the family unit the way she was, doing her work, doing the best she could, and then something really impossible and uncomfortable happens. And how do she, and by extension, how do we all manage to stand up in the face of that? So that sort of created the world in which I moved into domestic suspense. I didn't plan, like I didn't set out, oh, I want to write a domestic suspense book. I wanted to write this story. And that was the form that I felt like it should take.
What I really loved about your book was the relationship between Hannah and Bailey, because Bailey was the typical 16-year-old girl and really was not impressed by Hannah, her stepmother, at all. But by the end of the book, they get to the point where they're working together, they've created a bond, they're working toward the same goal. What was your impetus for that part of the story?
I really love paying attention to the different ways that people become a family. You know, I really wanted to sort of honor that sometimes one comes to motherhood through someone that they had no part in birthing. Need that care, and all the different ways we come to our found family. This was sort of an ode to that found family. I like the idea of creating a young woman who had never been mothered and an older woman who had never mothered, and they became each other's lock and key. I thought that was sort of a beautiful metaphor for what all motherhood and parenthood looks like, however you find your way to it.
The other thing that I really was a little bit surprised about, tried to figure out how it fit in, was the wording of Owen's note.
Yes.
Because he says, you know, I would not have been surprised if he had said, take care of her, because that would have seemed like the natural thing for him to say. But he said, protect her.
Yes.
And what was Hannah protecting Bailey from? The publicity surrounding the ugliness of Owen's failure, his disappearance? Was it because she was abandoned again? Did you just want your readers to come to their own conclusion about what was meant by that note?
You know, in my imagination, that note was written, and this is some of the pages that Owen, that we didn't get to see. That note was written in a rush when he was racing to get as much distance between himself and his family. And he took the time in that moment to try to write a note to Bailey in which she understood that this wasn't her fault, that she understood that he loved her, all the impossible things. And I think what he really didn't want to do with Hannah was be prescriptive. What that meant. I think he didn't have the time to tell her everything about what was going on, but he wanted to sort of say to her, however you need to do this, Bailey is the priority. And I think just like they really loved each other, they also had this shorthand, and that what she would know by him saying protect her was, there is forces out here that has taken me away from you all. And there are forces, I don't know how they're going to be coming at you, but when they do, she is the priority. I think that's really what he meant in that. Whereas if he had said something such as take care of her, or I can't be here, she might not know the aggression that he was worried they might face.
Great. Thank you very much. Really enjoyed your book.
Oh, thank you.
I think that also, by saying protect her, like saying it so emphatically, go do this.
Yep.
It was, don't think anything else. This is the
Yes.
only thing you need to focus on.
Exactly.
And as I was thinking about the book, and I've been thinking about it since I read it, because those lines of just stay here, stay in the moment with her. And so many times before he was like, well, let's just go here, the two of us, let's just go be here. But it's always, how are you going to bring Bailey into the picture? What are we going to do? Like,
Yes.
she's going to like you eventually.
Right. Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Now it's got to go a little bit faster. It's got to go a little bit faster.
Yes.
Debbie, thanks as always for joining us. And now we're going to bring up Shelly Victor, who is from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, who's actually, but she's up in Vermont right now, if I remember correctly. So Shelly, if you could share your question.
Sure. First of all, hi, Laura. And
Hi.
thank you so much for writing the book. It was just really, really wonderful. I think it's the protect her that made me think of this question. And although Owen says that he loved Hannah, I wonder how much, what was love, and was he really looking for a kind of person? Because I think I'm thinking that he felt that there was going to be a time where he'd have to flee. And because of that, he needed someone who would be responsible, who could love her, who had certain qualities that he felt comfortable with, because he was going to be gone. So I didn't know how much of it was that he really loved her, or that he also needed a certain person to be able to do this.
I believe that, and I understand why it might seem like he needed a certain kind of person. I believe that he had 10 years is a long time, and he had been safe for 10 years. And I think when he met Hannah, he had convinced himself, the way we all need to convince ourselves, when we have atrocities that we're moving past, or pain that we're moving past, that they are safe. He had to convince himself of that in order to, go on. Not that he didn't make, not that he didn't try to ensure the safety, but also enough time had passed that he did believe they were safe. And I think, there's a conversation with Grady that Hannah has toward the end of the book, in which he says, Owen believed that he was okay. He wouldn't, and that the best way to keep everyone okay was not to talk about it or share this with you, to leave that part in the past. And he probably would have been okay if he hadn't fallen into this other work situation, who could have anticipated that. So I do think he chose Hannah for Hannah, not because he thought she would be, she would have to be there should he have to flee. I don't think he was consciously thinking about that. What I do think subconsciously that he must have known is that she was the kind of woman who would do what was needed for Bailey.
Okay, thank you. And so you have all these words about Owen. Maybe there could be a book written about Owen. And
yeah. That's I'm writing another book right now that I'm almost finished with. And then I think I am going to be working on a sequel. I have started working on a sequel.
Right, because there's still a lot of unanswered questions.
There are.
So I think that would be terrific. Thank you for that scoop.
Yeah.
Well, again, thank you for writing that book, Laura. I loved it and enjoyed meeting you.
Oh, well, thank you, Shelly. And thank you for such thoughtful questions.
You're welcome.
Now, do you still have those 70,000 words that you threw out? You got those someplace, right? You didn't just throw those in the garbage, right?
No. I have them somewhere. Though so much has shifted in my initial analysis of this family that I wonder how many of them would be useful. But we'll see.
We'll see. We shall see. I love that the prologue takes on a different meaning once the reader has finished the book. And I'm going to encourage everybody who's read the book to now go back and take a look at the prologue, because I always read a prologue and go, what's this book really going to be about? But now I'm in the habit of going back to read those because you've got some clues up front. But did you write the prologue at the beginning or towards the end? When did that come in? And everybody, you are going to want to go pick that back up.
I wrote the prologue. That was the first thing I wrote. And I wrote that a long time ago. Actually, even before 2011, I imagined that being attached to a different story. And when I found my way to Hannah, I realized this is where that belonged. So that was the first thing I wrote.
Amazing. Keep track of all these things. I would have to find the file. I couldn't even find the file, put the picture up today. Really, seriously, Pina Hornick from Basking Ridge couldn't be here tonight, but she wants me to ask her question. What is your process for working out the plot of a story as intricate as this? Because there's a lot going on. We've heard you don't really outline first. You really are just writing. And do you work out all these details? Do you ever get backed into the corner and go, oh, how do I get back out of here? What am I going to do? Or does it really just, some people said it's in real time. It's like, this is just what's happening to me as I go. And you've talked a little bit about, your writing process, but is there anything like end is here, this is here, and maybe middle?
So that is a great question. So I often get backed into a corner. And when I think when the writing is going well, when I'm deeper into the book. So for me, the first 60 pages take me the longest. I spend about the same amount of time on the first 30,000 words, let's call it 20 to 30,000 words, as I spend on the next 50 or 60. Because that's just sort of because I'm figuring out, I'm moving into it. And then when I'm there, when I'm in the middle of the book, I have often thrown out 2/3 of a book, 1/3 of a book. I end up throwing out a lot because my character reveals something to me. I always think about, when I started writing, I would listen to writers, at book talks and at readings, and some of them would say things like, I feel like I'm in conversation with my characters. And I always thought, well, that sounds kind of corny because you're writing. But then I realized that for me feels true as well. When the writing is going well, I almost feel like I'm getting to know them the same way you get to know good friends, and you learn more as time goes on about what they would and wouldn't do. And sometimes, and that's the great thing, I'll get somewhere and I'll be like, oh my God, this changes what came before. And it doesn't feel like more work. It feels like I needed that as almost prologue to get me to where I was going. As an example of this, in the last thing he told me, when I knew that they were going to go to Austin, only when I realized they needed to go somewhere. And when they got to Austin, at first I had them figure out much sort of sooner something about Owen that sent them down a different direction, in which he was completely innocent. And then I realized in the rewriting, he cannot be completely innocent. He has to have made mistakes and bad decisions just like everybody else. And that's, that nuance is going to shift everything about what has happened. And when I realized that nuance, I realized he lied to them about some very important things, which made the mystery much more enticing because they were finding things out it's a really awful thing to find out that you're not who you thought you were. And he needed to have some responsibility for that. And so, that's an example of then I went back and rewrote a lot of the book.
Yeah.
With that.
I did like the part where they went to the church and they were
Yeah.
saying, well, the ceremony was on this day
Yeah.
at this time. And
Yeah.
no, there were no games because the church was closed. I mean, it's just all those little details of you have to hit a roadblock. You have to hit another roadblock. How do you get past that roadblock? What do you know? What are you supposed to know? It's going both ways. It's what do you know? And what are you supposed to be knowing?
Yes,
So,
exactly.
So Chris Jones from Yuma, Arizona, asked to have this question read on her behalf. When Hannah sees Owen Ethan on the last page of the book, he says, quote, "The could have been boys still love you."
Yes.
Is he referring to himself as both Owen and Ethan or something else?
That's a great question. I think in that moment, he is trying to say to her, I can't be here for you. So that has essentially made me someone you used to be with, but I still love you. I'm so grateful for everything you have done for this child that is now our child. And I will always love you. That's how I imagined it. I have since thought that he has come back for a reason. And so it's not as simple as a goodbye again or a hello again.
Fun. Isn't it fun to hear what readers are thinking about with your book? Like you sit there and you write this book, turn it in, and it's like, wait a second, these people have all these questions. I thought I had them all answered on that page,
Yes, it's very fun. I love it.
It's really great. Laura Beth Fighter is going to join us from Summerfield, North Carolina with her question. Laura Beth, take it away.
Hi, Laura.
Hi, thanks, Laura, for being here. And my double name, my Texas 2 name kind of gives it away. Even though I live in North Carolina, I'm from Texas originally.
Nice.
And so when my alma mater of my little school, Rice University, 2,000 students when I was there, popped up in this novel, I mean, my eyes about popped out of my head. So we aren't mentioned too much. So I was just curious, why Rice? And, not only was it in the book, it's now in the series on Apple TV in a little bit different way, but any connection there, and why Rice?
So, yes. And also I did notice in the questions that some people have been asking, it's on Apple Television, Apple TV Plus. So thank you also for saying that. Yes. So basically I do a ton of research when I'm working on a book. And one thing that I did was go to Austin and literally go through the days just as Hannah and Bailey did. I stayed at the hotel. I did the walk to campus. I went to a bar, like I find a bar that looks like that. I do everything they do. And in one of my cab rides, when I was there, or I think it was a cab driver, mentioned the building where the owl appeared. And that looks like an owl. And so I thought, oh my God, that detail is so great. That's why I go and do all the research, because there's no way to read that online, like unless you were looking for it, and you'd only be looking for it if you went to Rice. So it helps me create sort of I always think if I was writing about a dentist and I didn't know, and I never shadowed a dentist, I'd write about cavities because that's what we think about when we think about a dentist. But if you go to a dentist and spend time with the dentist, you can learn something really interesting about the tools they use and why the light looks a certain way. And so that's what I try to do. And on one of the trips to Austin, that's what I found out. And I'm like, well, this is going in there.
Well, I think a cab ride is a much better way to research than having to sit in the dentist's office.
Yes, I agree.
No, awesome job. And I just really appreciate it. And thank you, Shelly, for pulling up that tidbit about the sequel coming up. I know we're all really excited. And I don't know if I can ask one more, Carol, but can you tell us anything about your book that you said that you're almost finished with? Because that's exciting too.
I sure can. So that book, it's far enough along that I sure can. That book is also in the same vein, sort of a domestic suspense mystery. And it has to do with two estranged siblings trying to understand what happened to their father, who mysteriously dies at the beginning of the book.
We'll be waiting. Thank you so much.
I love that it's that far along. Those are the words I really like the most,
Yes, yes.
Lena saying
it was also influenced by something in art. This part I'll save, but it was also influenced by an article I read in the news and a case that I became very interested in.
Isn't it funny? You rip things out and you put them in a pile and say, that one really
Yes.
has me intrigued of what's
Yes.
going on.
Yes.
And, it's funny because a lot of the true crime and the documentaries that are on right now,
Yeah.
like I feel like the woman who, I don't remember anybody's name, who did the blood thing that was bad, Theranos, went to jail today.
Yes.
And I feel like I know everything about her walking into this jail just because of the shows that I've watched about her. And I
Yes.
said, it's so interesting to see how so much of what we know from the news, but it's also infused by the things we watch that we feel like we get to know these people. you know?
Yes, yes, totally. And I think sometimes for me, I never write about people in my life, but I'm very interested in sort of plumbing emotional questions. And sometimes you see an article or something and it raises a question for you. Like the new book, the last thing you told me, the question was really, can we ever know the people we love? And the new book has a lot to do with what does it mean to be the witness to someone's life? And that comes directly from something I read that I thought to your point, you sometimes don't know why you're interested in something. And then you look at it again and again, and then you figure out, oh, this is what I'm interested in,
We had friends when we were growing up and the father was never around very much, wasn't around very much. And we were like, is he with the FBI or the CIA? Because at that time, you wouldn't have been around your family. You would have been, and it was not like he had a job that he was someplace else. And you always have these questions of what was he really doing all that time that he wasn't around? And it just begged that question that you see, so-and-so's father was never there. What was he really doing? What was it? Yeah,
exactly.
and you play those games. So Lena Singh from Frisco, Texas was also impressed that you noted everything, including the famous Longhorn burnt orange color. She was like blown away that you knew this. And she also wants to know that she burned dinner last night as she was absorbed in reading the book, finishing the book. That makes her a true reader. So speaking of food, we know that you love to cook, and the recipe for Bailey's Redemption pasta, I was trying to get my husband to make this tonight, is linked from your website. For those who want to cook, I think we need to include that link to that Instagram page in our follow-up notes. And it's Cooking with Laura, because you love to cook, right?
I love to cook. Yes. Yes. So and also equally fun, probably more fun, is that Jennifer Garner, who plays Hannah Hall in the show, just did a pretend cooking show in which she also makes the pasta. And then this feels like the ultimate honor, which is that the restaurant that I mentioned in the book is a real restaurant. It's called Poggio, and it's in Sausalito. And they just put on the menu, because it wasn't a real recipe from the restaurant, I made it up. But now you can go to the restaurant and eat the last thing he told me, pasta. So
I love this.
That was pretty exciting.
I think in return for the recipe, they should be selling books at the front desk. I think that when you call for a reservation, it's like, okay, would you like a table for 4 and 4 bucks? What would you like? I think we've got to get this idea going,
I like that idea very much. That's a great idea.
Little bookshelf behind as you check out, a little thing on the menu, like, what would you like to have? I think we should just think about that.
Oh, I love that idea.
Marilyn Nestor from Tickfaw of Louisiana said, we do have people across the country, which is really the reason we love doing this.
It's wonderful.
Do you always write alone? And how do you handle writer's block if you hit that wall?
That's a great question. I usually write alone. And my husband is also a writer. He's a screenwriter. So sometimes we'll sit in the same room, which I love. But I usually write alone. I write not every day anymore. It used to be every day. Now it's probably 5 days a week. I write first thing in the morning. I think that social media and the internet in general it makes writing very challenging, at least for me. So when I'm really in it on a book, I don't check the internet or social media or anything until after I've done my morning writing. I always write in the morning. I tend to listen to the same song on repeat when I'm writing. And the best thing I can advise for writer's block is just that you still sit down every day. Because when you're in the conversation with your work, you'll ultimately get to where you need to go. And I think part of what has helped me is that I never look at the throwing out or the starting again or moving to something else as failing that project. It all feels to me as a piece of getting to the end. That's what you have to do to get there.
So here's a question. You're typing on a computer. You don't have access to the internet. I take it when you're doing that. If you have a
Yes.
question about something, I always stop and go look it up. Do you
Yeah.
just find this later, look this up later, so you'll keep writing?
Exactly. I think
Okay.
you have to do that because otherwise you'll make a million excuses to stop and look things up. I
Mhm.
don't need to figure out the name of Antone's in Austin at that moment. I just need to know that I have to find a club in Austin to fit that bill. And then I can go back later and put in the name Antone's. So that's something that I really stick to.
Yeah. And it's hard because there's so many things that could flare up. If you look at your computer for 2 seconds, there's 20 things you need to answer or
Totally.
what you need to do. So it's nearly, so do you have actually a different computer or just disciplined enough not to turn on the internet?
I'm pretty disciplined not to turn on the internet.
Mm.
I have my phone nearby in case my son needs school calls or anything like that, or someone needs to reach me. So I'll have my ringer on, but I turn the texts on to quiet, and I'm pretty diligent about not getting it. I do it for myself because
Mhm.
what I find is whatever you pay the most attention to, you're the best at.
Mhm.
And I don't want to be, I don't want to take for granted how lucky I feel. I love writing. I've always loved writing, that I get to write. And I think I got pretty disciplined at it, even when I was working on my first book, because I was in graduate school. I spilled water on my computer and I lost the whole thing.
Yeah.
Right when I finished, which is a story, you know, Carol. So I really felt strongly that I have to be devoted to that writing time. Back then, I had like a ton of other jobs that made me devoted to it. And now I just stay devoted to it, even though this is my primary work
That's
outside
great.
of my family.
Okay, so wait, the song you play over and over. I've got to
Yes.
go back to this. What was the song that you had with this book? And is it a different song with each book?
It's a different song with each book. With this book, it was If I Should Fall Behind, a live version of the Bruce Springsteen song that he sang at Madison Square Garden.
And that was the one that, and so the book right now, different song?
Different song.
Different song on repeat.
Yes.
I tell you something. Friday nights when it's really like the end of the week, I play that song, This Is How We Do It, like really loudly. And then for Tom Donadio, our editorial director who lives in New York, I play The Only Living Boy in New York, because these are my two things. And it's Tom, get your plane around on top. And it's sometimes that music thing just gets you to a different zone. It just moves you to a
Totally.
different place. And it's like,
Totally.
okay, guys, this is where we are. This is where we are.
Exactly. And I think it creates a meditative quality to the writing and to the whatever activity you're doing that helps you remember from day to day. It creates a rhythm underneath what you're doing.
And it's like, yes, this is, and there's also no distraction because you know the words, you know the rhythm, you know what's going on in the song. It's not like you have to learn something or pay attention to it. It's just
That's
there.
very well said. Yep, I agree.
So now we're going to move to audience questions with Tom Donadio, our only living boy in New York, our editorial director, to facilitate this part of the program. So Tom, here you go. Take it away.
All right, thank you, Carol. Yeah, we have some good questions here. So now, Laura, I know earlier you had talked a little bit about those 70,000 words that you threw away. Vicky wants to know if you have a scene from all of those words that you wish would have stayed in the book.
You know, I haven't looked at them in so long. I will say this, the final scene, I can envision that the final scene that I imagined as the final scene of the first book may end up being the final scene of the second book.
Interesting.
Maybe not, but I think I was attached to it for a reason. So it might show up in some way or another.
Judy asks, why did Grady give Hannah his phone number on a napkin instead of a business card? Was this a red herring?
So I think the reason that he did that is most people who are not Hannah, if they got that number, wouldn't start reverse engineering. That's a Texas number. He gave her the cell phone number, not the office number. I think he didn't want to draw attention to the fact that he worked out of the Austin bureau. So I think that was the East Texas bureau of the West Texas of the marshal's office. So I think that was why he did that. He came to see her despite any sort of red flags that might raise, because he thought maybe she knew something that he needed to know to protect Owen. He underestimated what she would do in response to that meeting.
Mm. She had no idea. She just thought that was somebody else out to get him. She
Yes.
had no idea what was going on. And he was so
Exactly.
coy when he hands that to her. And she's like, wait a second, somebody else is trying to get in my house. Somebody else is doing this. Here's another person I need to defend myself from.
Exactly.
So we have a question from Linda. Do you base your characters' names on people you know?
No, I actually don't. That's a great question. I always know when the writing is going well because the characters' names come to me. And sometimes, like, for example, with Hannah and Bailey, for the first several years, their names were Sarah and Diana, and then Sarah and Phoebe. And like, it moves and it moves until I find the right name. And sometimes when I know I've locked in on the name, it unlocks something for me in the characters, but it's never people I know.
And then you hit find and replace.
Yes, exactly. Oh
Find
my
Phoebe,
God.
replace with.
Exactly, Bailey.
So we have a question from an anonymous attendee. How close is the TV adaptation to the book?
The TV adaptation is fairly close to the book. I think that there are definitely a bunch of Easter eggs in there for people that love the book. And it's really expansive in a way that when you're in the first person narrative in a book, you can't sort of creep into other people's storylines in the same way so you get more visibility on Bailey, on Jules, on Grady, on Nicholas, on Owen. So in that way, I think for readers, there's a lot of treats in the adaptation. At the same time, you're not going to, I think, walk into the adaptation and be like, why did they change so many things that it changed the book for me? So it's both faithful to the book and expansive. Expands out from the book,
Which I'm sure readers will very much appreciate.
Yeah.
And I think that moment where you see Bailey singing, there things with Bailey with her boyfriend.
Yes.
You can't really write those same kind of emotions quite the same way. You can hear she was singing, but you hear her singing and you hear how she is so into what she's doing. You realize pulling her away from that would be really hard. And you see that a lot more than you can do on the page. I mean, you can do so much on the page, but then when you hear her sing, you see something else. When you see her boyfriend cares about her, you see something else.
Yes, exactly. You see a fully formed person.
As she declines calls because she knows she has to. Different things.
Yeah.
Denise wants to know if there's a particular moment in the TV adaptation that took your own breath away.
So one thing that I really loved in the adaptation was watching Jennifer Garner and the character playing David Morse. Oh, sorry, the character playing Nicholas, his name's David Morse, in that final exchange in which they're negotiating for what's going to happen next, in which she asks him to save Owen. And then ultimately asks him just to protect Bailey. Because for me, I always thought about that exchange when I was writing it in the book as kind of a 3-act play: the meeting, the messy middle, and the resolution, in which these two people who really have nothing in common except the one most important thing, which is that they're going to do anything they need to do for this child. And I loved writing that scene for the book, and I loved seeing it realized by these two extraordinary actors.
That was real tension. That was real tension of she's in this situation, especially when the guard walks away and things like that. It's like, no, you can leave. It's like really scary. You've got you right here.
Totally. I totally agree.
We have a question from Helene. Can you talk a bit about the theme of always having a choice? Several characters were told that.
I think that sometimes it can feel like when you're inside something, the only thing you have is bad choices. And I think that's a very real feeling that we can often struggle with depending on what's going on in our lives. But I like the idea that even inside bad choices, and Hannah has some really bad choices, you can find your way, if you're operating with integrity, toward the best of those choices that can lead you somewhere that you might not have wanted to go, but it's ultimately a really rewarding place unto itself.
wasn't your plan, but it still got you to where you needed to be. I like
Exactly.
that.
Now, I know you talked about a little bit about your next book. Amy wants to know if you know when that book is scheduled to come out.
I think it depends when I get it in.
Right. That's
Sometime
a little early in the process.
sometimes next year.
Sometime next year.
Mhm.
This book is still selling in paperback too, which is another big thing too. You know,
Yeah.
it's just you're doing super, super well. And I love that. I love that people are not just relying on watching something, they're looking for reading the book. And I really, really love seeing that as people coming to really enjoy the written word. And I think that was just so gratifying when I saw this coming out, you know?
Yes, I totally agree. It's so lovely to hear that from people.
Yeah.
Jill, and I think this might be the final question. Jill asks, do you have any rituals when your book is finally done and edited?
That's a great question. I used to have a ritual of having a glass of champagne when it was done. Now I actually feel a little sad when a book is done. Something has shifted for me because when it's done and it's going out, that's kind of the last time it's just with me. I love being in conversation with readers, but then it belongs to the readers. And I want to make sure that what I'm giving to the readers is the absolute best version of itself that it can be, because I feel incredible gratitude for everyone who picks up the book with all of our options now for entertainment and for what to do in our spare time. Like, I don't take that lightly. And so there's something when I'm done and I don't get to look at it anymore. Like Mary Sue would, my editor, my wonderful editor, who Carol knows quite well, like sometimes she's like, give me the book. Like I really try to hold on to it as long as I can.
She's like, I just need to see it.
Yes,
now,
exactly.
I have a question. Mary Sue sees it at one point. Does your agent see it at the same time? Do they both get it? And then, or is it really just going to Mary Sue to say, what do you think?
So I usually, because Mary Sue opinion is so important to me, and I like it to be really close when I give it to her, because her notes are so thoughtful and her holistic vision is so thoughtful that I want to give her something that's close. So usually, which probably drives her crazy, I go through several drafts with my readers, my close friends, like Jonathan Tropper, who's a novelist, is a reader for me often. And my agent and my film agent, they often see an earlier draft, just in case there's something low-hanging fruit that I missed. I can clean it and make it ready for her. Because when I get Mary Sue's nod of approval, that means more to me than just about anything.
Funny Jonathan Tropper story. You know how he's funny. He writes funny. So I'm at an event at a bookstore, and I said, your comedic like sense, and I asked him some question about that, and he goes, comedic? Who are we, British?
That's hilarious.
Blah, blah, blah. And then I stood up and waved, and he went, oh my gosh. He goes, I'm now in the newsletter.
Oh my God, that's hilarious. That's so funny.
I said, start pulling something. I'm going to catch you. It was very, very funny. It was really good. Yeah.
Laura, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
We actually have
a question.
We actually do have a couple more questions that came in. Judy wants to know, was that your title or did the publisher choose it?
That was my title. I went through several titles, and when I locked in on this one, I was sure of it. And in fact, someone very late in the process suggested changing it to protect her after this, and I was sold on this title.
Yeah, totally works.
And Denise wants to know, what are you reading now that you love?
So I'm actually in the middle. I do a lot of rereading when there's a book I really love, especially when I'm deep into my writing. I'm rereading a book called Heartburn by Nora Ephron, which is one of my favorites. And I just love it. And I pick it up whenever I need like a comfort book, or if I'm really thinking and working really hard. That's often what I pick up at night. I'm also reading a couple of books that are coming out that friends' books that with an eye toward blurbing for them. And let me see, what else have I been reading recently that, I mean, I feel like there's so many great books out right now that I have on my nightstand. I have the new Liv Constantine on my nightstand. I have the new Tom Hanks book on my nightstand.
Yeah.
I have the new Alex Fenley book on my nightstand, the new one by William Landry. He wrote Defending Jacob, which is one of my favorite books. I have that on my nightstand.
I
And then-
interviewed him. That one's really good.
It is
really
good?
really
Oh,
good.
wow. I really want to read that
Well,
then.
it's very different. It's very
It's
different. It's written 4 different points of view.
Oh, wow.
It's
Okay. I
really,
have to pick that up.
really
Yeah.
crazy interesting. Really, I interviewed him and it was like, wow, this is what you did. You know, it was good.
You have a
Yeah.
lot of great reading ahead. You have a
Yeah.
lot to look forward to. So we just talked about the title, and Linda wants to know about the cover. Did you choose the cover yourself?
So this was the easiest cover situation that had ever sort of come to be. This was one of the first covers they sent me. It felt right. I showed a couple people and I was like, oh, that's the cover. And we just sort of knew. It was in the first batch of covers they sent me. That has never happened before.
And the writing on it too. Everything works. Everything works on the whole thing.
It's really great. It's a great cover.
Yeah.
Very evocative.
Very eye-arresting. Do we have anything else?
I think that wraps up the Q&A.
We have smart readers, don't we, Laura? Don't we have
Oh my
smart
gosh, this was such a pleasure.
I think
You have
that's-
such smart readers. You
We
make me
love
think.
doing these events. Thank you so much for joining us and being a part of this. We really, really appreciate your time.
Thank you so
I
much, Laura.
I really appreciate you having me. As you know, I've been a long-standing Book Reporter fan and Carol Fitzgerald fan. So
You're so
anytime,
sweet. You're
anytime.
so sweet. And what are you going to go make for dinner? That's what we need to know.
So I actually, it's about 6 o'clock here. So I actually cooked before. So,
Uh-huh.
So it's ready. It's a stew that is in Bon Appetit. It's a curry red lentil stew. And it's really, really yummy. If you look up
Okay.
curry red lentils and Bon Appetit, it comes up.
Come up with that recipe.
Yeah.
There you go. I think we need more recipes next time around as well in the book. We need more
Definitely.
recipes of what to do.
I love
Thanks for
it.
joining us. We look forward to next time. We'll be finding you for that next book. We absolutely promise.
Okay, wonderful. Okay.
Okay, great. Have a lovely evening.
You too. Bye.
Bye now. And I've got a couple of more announcements from us. Tonight's event will be available on YouTube and our podcast later. We may even be up for maybe having it ready by tomorrow. And we'll alert everyone who's signed up when that goes live. Our next Bookaccino live evening event is going to be on Wednesday, June 30th at 8 p.m., where we're going to be doing something a little bit different. I'm going to present summer reading titles that I think you and book clubs will enjoy. And sign up for this event is going to be on Book Reporter and Reading Group Guides probably later this week. The other thing is we're not going to have a Bookaccino live book group in July and August, that we know a lot of people are traveling. And even though you can get to your computer wherever you are, we just know that, people get taken away because they're on vacation. So we're going to pick up in September. And right now the plan is that our guest is going to be Alice Elliott Dark. And we're going to be discussing her book, Fellowship Point, which came out last year in hardcover and is now out in paperback. And we want to give you time to read it. It's a big book. And one of the reasons I'm doing this is I think that a lot of times people don't want to read books that are long. They say, oh, I don't want to do something that's long, So we want to give you time to be able to do this book. And we'll get back to you on what the date is going to be. I interviewed Alice a couple of weeks ago, and we actually talked about this and how we want to do a deep dive into the book, because we feel that people read kind of like up here these days. And we want to really be able to get into a book, which is, yes, it's a main author. It's a main setting. You're right, Mamie. And it's one of those books that I absolutely loved last year. And I love the beauty of the writing in it. And sometimes I'm reading quickly, and I found that I really slowed myself down to enjoy this book. So we want to give everybody time to enjoy it before we have our discussion. On Wednesday, June 14th at 2 o'clock, we're going to be hosting our monthly Bookaccino live preview event. Sign-ups available now on bookreporter.com. Remember, if you can't be there live, we will send you later on the tape of this. The book, once again, that is Fellowship Point, and it's by Alice Elliott Dark. Okay. To stay on top of everything that we're doing, we hope that you sign up for our Book Reporter newsletters, which really tell you like everything that's going on the site at every moment, contests, giveaways, all kinds of things that we're doing. And then you'll never have to miss an event. And a reminder that we have more than 165, I can't believe this, Book Reporter Talks to Author interviews available on our YouTube channel, the Book Report Network, and wherever you listen to podcasts. So video, podcast, whatever you'd like to do. And if you want to share tonight's interview with your friends on video or podcast, we'll be sending you the links. Feel free to do that, because the way we build our audience, we absolutely love getting this to as many people as possible, especially since Laura was so very generous with her time tonight. So thank you all for joining us. I hope to see you. We're back in June where I have some summer book selection ideas for you. And if not, we'll see you as the summer goes on back in September. We'll see you in September. Okay. Thanks so much, everyone.